Hi everybody, I'm Greg Fishel. Welcome to bonus weather video number 1 for this week. This is makeup day, not the kind of makeup that you put on your face, but making up for lost time. So the bonus weather video that should have come out Monday, coming out now, and the one that should come out today is going to be coming out just shortly after this one. So we'll be back up on target in terms of the obligations for the week. All right, so let's go on ahead and put myself down here in the corner, and we're going to be taking a look at normals. Okay, now normals are defined as a 30-year average, okay? And I've talked a lot about the fact that I would be more in favor of a normal range of temperatures for a given date as opposed to a specific number, simply due to the fact that we do have year-to-year variability. But what I did, since I couldn't find anywhere on the web to find the normals from like 1951 to 80 and 61 to 90, they updated every 10 years based on a 30-year period. And so what I did was I went back and took the average of all of the months for whatever 30-year period I was looking at, and I compared that with the normals that have been calculated by the National Center for Environmental Information for the most recent period, 1991 to 2020. And as you can see there, the lines are almost indistinguishable, okay? There's a couple of tenths of a degree difference between the two, but basically it's the same thing. So I felt confident in using this technique to go back and reconstruct the normals from 51 to 80, 61 to 90, 71 to 2000, 81 to 2010, and then the most recent one, 1991 to 2020. So with all that in mind, this is the way the normals have progressed, and they have definitely gotten warmer, not drastically, but they've definitely gotten warmer over time. But a couple of things I found really interesting here, and I'm speculating here. This is not peer-reviewed literature, okay? You'd have to do a lot more rigorous, detailed research to be able to either validate or invalidate the hypotheses that I'm about to offer you here. But at least in a very crude sense, the science makes sense to me, but again, I would never want this to be misinterpreted as a rigorous scientific adventure here, okay? So the one thing that I noticed that stands out is the biggest warming occurs up here during the summer months and also here during the winter months, okay? Now, I would argue that this part here may be related to climate change, and I'll talk more about the explanation behind that reasoning in just a second. But this area up in here, I would speculate, is more due to the RDU effect, if you will, than anything that's going on with the climate, or at least it would dominate the amount of warming caused by the climate and the greenhouse gases, that this would be the main deal here, okay? And if we take a look at the amount of warming by the seasons, I found this interesting as well. This is just another way of looking at what I just showed you, is that the winter months have actually warmed the most over that period from 1951 to 1980 to 1991 to 2020, or about a 40-year period. And then the fall and the spring have not experienced as much warming, okay? So here is the scientific speculation on my part as to why I came to those two conclusions, or at least why I formulated those two hypotheses. So the nights are obviously much longer during the winter season, so a portion of the heat that would normally be lost to space is being absorbed by the greenhouse gases and then re-emitted toward the Earth. Now, just to clear up something here, when these greenhouse gases absorb radiation, they don't just re-emit toward the ground. They re-emit in all directions, okay? But we're only concerned about the fact that it's coming toward the ground, because that's what we're going to experience here. And so this is one of the reasons why the Arctic warms up the most during the winter season, okay? Because in some of those areas, you know, it's dark 24 hours a day. And so all of that heat, quote unquote, in the Arctic would have been lost to space. Part of that is being absorbed by the greenhouse gases and then re-emitted, whereas when the nights aren't nearly as long or non-existent in some of the polar regions during the summertime, that effect is not nearly as dominant. So that's the reasoning on my part behind that. Now in the summertime, we have much longer days, obviously, and the solar radiation is much more direct. the sun gets to about 77 or 78 degrees above the horizon, which is not directly overhead, but it's close. Okay, it's within 12 degrees of being directly overhead. Whereas in the wintertime, it only gets 30 degrees above the horizon. So it's coming in at a very, very shallow angle. So the solar radiation is more direct, and so thus the potential for very, very hot runways, and of course since 1996, that's where the temperature sensor has been adjacent to the runway. And so you have a potential for very hot runways, as well as decreased soil moisture. During the summer months, with the solar radiation being as intense as it is, if you don't get some thunderstorms over a period of time, then the soil moisture dries out. And so any energy that would go into evaporating soil moisture is now going into heating the ground. And so the ground can get much, much hotter in that kind of an environment, okay? So there is the potential, because of both of those things, for the sensor to read high. And remember that the 91 to 2020 climate normals, the ones we're using now, the temperature sensor was located adjacent to the airport runway for 25 of those 30 years. February of 1996 is when that equipment was installed in the location that it was installed in. So we are now getting a more complete picture of the effect of moving the sensor to that location, okay, as opposed to 1951 to 1980 and 1961 to 1990. That new sensor location had nothing to do with it because they hadn't been installed yet. So now we're getting, a more complete picture as to what that effect has been and may continue to be over time. So I have always argued that, it's not as simple as simply saying, oh, we're warming and it's all due to climate change, okay? The RDU airport is not the same animal now that it was back in the 40s and 50s and 60s, okay? It's a much bigger complex. There's more tarmac. There's more buildings, there's more potential for all of those surfaces to absorb more heat and then warm the air around them. And so it's a combination in my mind. Now, if you're in a rural location, then you can pretty much, whatever warming you're seeing, you can probably, chalk up to an overall change in the climate. But if you're in an urban area, and the RDU airport could certainly be classified as that, then as a result, you really have to look a little deeper and say, okay, part of it's this, but part of it is this as well. Okay, I hope that makes a little bit of sense. That's bonus weather video number 1 for this week. Number 2 will be coming up very, very shortly. And number 2 was motivated by in my mind, the surprise rain that we had last Saturday night when I thought the chances were very small. And not only did we get a few drops, we got 1/10 of an inch at the airport, and a friend of mine had 1/4 of an inch. He lives off to the south and east of Raleigh. So it was a respectable event. And I went back and looked at something and again hypothesized as to what may have happened here. So that's the bonus weather video number 2 coming up very, very shortly. Okay, folks, that's it. You have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and we'll talk to you with the next bonus weather video very shortly, and of course the daily update later this afternoon. Take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.